Theo Usherwood, political commentator, is back with us. Theo, good afternoon to you.
A very good afternoon to you, Ian.
Always good
to be with you.
and nice to have you with us again. So these figures, 7.5 billion in universal credit claimed by households with at least one foreign national. This is 2023 figures that we've got, calling for more reforms for the benefit system. Let's have a listen to Chancellor Rachel Reeves speaking earlier this month on this very issue.
We know that the welfare system is not working. It's not working for taxpayers, it's not working for our economy, and it's not working for people on benefits who are stuck on those benefits rather than being given the support to get back into meaningful work. Everyone who can work should be working, and this government is determined to provide the support as well as reform the welfare system to ensure that work always pays.
That work always pays. And here's the problem. I mean, it's a soundbite that every politician has used, Theo, forever, isn't it? We've got to ensure that work pays. Brown said it, Blair said it, Cameron said it, Thatcher probably said it, Major doubtless said it. They all say it. What does it actually mean?
Well, look, just to pick up on that £7.5 billion figure, which of course is being paid to foreign nationals in 2023, many of your viewers, listeners will rightly argue, well, how can we allow that to happen at the same time slash benefits for most vulnerable, for the disabled? And that 7.5 billion, first to say, that's a huge figure, but it is not as high as the incapacity sickness benefits bill, which was around 23 billion before the pandemic, and on current projections it's due to hit 70 billion by 2030. So it's already, it's going to be around 10 times what that foreign national bill is in 5 years' time. So that's why they're looking at the bigger portion of the benefits pie, and that's why the government wants to cut that rather than slash that 7.5 billion. The other particular issue is, Ian, that when you come to this country, and the government wants to, of course, ensure that the backlog of those travelling across the English Channel, arriving in this country, and then we've got to, it was in more than 100,000. They need to get that down. Of course, those are people that are costing this country £8 million a day in hotel bills. In order to do that, yes, you can deport many of those, but some of them, under the current criteria, will be able to successfully apply for refugee status. And according to the Refugee Council, by current estimations, that was around 60 to 70,000 as of last year. So those people, as the government looks to clear that backlog and reduce that hotel bill, yes, it can do that, but it has to accept that whilst they will be successful in deporting many people back to their countries of origin, they will have to accept that many of those individuals will be allowed to stay in this country. And that the point at which they're allowed to stay in this country, they get refugee status and they'll ultimately get indefinite leave to remain, but they will remain foreign nationals. They will then be able to work. But of course, universal credit, which is the main form of benefit in this country, 40% of those on universal credit, their wages aren't high enough in order to sustain their lives, and therefore they have their wages topped up by universal credit, and therefore they will be a benefit claimant. And that's why we end up with the bill. I'm not excusing it. I'm not saying it's right.
No, that is. You're absolutely right. It's the official explanation.
I'm trying to explain to you why it's happening, and it will drive many people on this radio station completely potty to think, well, hang on a moment, the government wants to slash benefits for the most vulnerable, but at the same time, we're handing out a bill running more than £7 billion for foreign nationals.
Somebody somewhere, there's a very real sense, there's a real appetite out there at the moment, and certainly when Rachel Reeves, I noticed one poll saying that, that Rachel, the thing Rachel Reeves has on her side, because it'd be a bit of a rebellion from Labour MPs, Diane Abbott. If Diane Abbott stands up and says this is a terrible thing, then the chances are it's a very good thing. Just whatever she says, just think the very opposite to that. But nonetheless, the people really on the side of the Chancellor are the public. I think most members of the public, most people, there's lots of polls bearing this out, are saying this madness needs to stop. And there's an appetite for a leader that would say, this has all got to stop. I mean, the numbers we talk about, when we were talking about individuals, hundreds of thousands of people, billions of pounds in money, all manner of extraordinary statistics. And this is all coming out of hard-working taxpayers' money. I mean, there's no magic, to coin the phrase, no magic money tree. I mean, it's insane. We're in an upside-down world, Theo.
But this is But this is the reason why the country isn't working. I mean, fundamentally, you've got not enough people out there working, paying taxes, contributing to a pot that can go into the Treasury, which they can then, pay for the most vulnerable who need our support. The pot of the most vulnerable who need our support has got too large. And that's why we find ourselves in the trouble that we find ourselves in economically. And that's what the Chancellor wants to ultimately fix. But the question is, and this is the question that Labour MPs are asking, is, OK, well, you can cut the benefits for those individuals, but you're going to end up in a situation where those are individuals, these are disabled people who can't ultimately work, and you're just going to impoverish them.
Yeah.
You come to the question about a rebellion. It's worth mentioning now that actually the changes that the government are looking at won't trigger a rebellion. They'll just trigger lots of Labour MPs coming onto the radio stations and television studios and shouting off and saying how terrible it is, because what the government's actually looking at doing is not going to freeze the PIP payments, but what it's going to do is it's going to change the criteria. If it was to freeze the PIP payments, that would require a vote in the House of Commons, and then you'd end up with a rebellion. But by changing the criteria, they can do that without necessarily going to a vote in the House of Commons. So what they're going to do is, in broad terms, when it comes to incapacity disability benefits, how those are determined is you notch up points, and the more points you get, the more benefits you get. And so when you can't do something, you are entitled to so many points. And when you fill in the form, those points add up to a certain number of benefits. So if you can't wash yourself, then you get a certain number of points. If you can't cook for yourself, then you get a certain number of points.
Yeah.
And what the government's looking at doing is changing those criteria, so actually it's harder to get the higher number of points and therefore claim the greater amount of benefits. And they can do that without going to a vote in the House of Commons. So Diana Abbott, John McDonnell, all of those Labour left-wing MPs, they're not going to get a say in this when it comes to a vote in the Commons, and therefore there ultimately won't be a big...
Then they're not as such changing the law, right? They are changing elements of the criteria, etc., which, as you rightly say, clever stuff, but it's just how it works. Theo, stay with us. We're going to talk about Nigel Farage's latest announcement as well of those defectors. Trump and Putin set to have a phone call tomorrow as well. Here's a great point from a mate of mine called Andrew. I won't give any other details, who says it might be amusing to your listeners to compare the benefit figure for foreign nationals with the yearly inheritance tax take. That's such a good point. I bet you if you added it up, you'd discover a sort of spooky synergy between those two numbers. Or look, people who've worked hard all their life and passed some money down to their kids to assist them so they don't have to sponge off the state is going to be taken by the state and given to people who are sponging off the state. I mean, you can't make this nonsense up. When does the madness stop?